Welcome to the Scale Modelling Chaos channel. This video we will be looking at the Meng Toon King Tiger German heavy tank. This is a push fit kit, so you don't need to use any glue. This is the first video in a series we will be doing. The first video will look at building the kit. The second and third videos will be looking at painting and weathering. So here we go. So the first stage of the build looks to put the wheels onto the lower hull. Now, because I want to do some weathering onto the on the lower hull, I'm not actually going to fit the wheels onto the tank today. What I'm going to do is just get the wheels put together and we'll fit them later. Now, there are two sets of wheels that go at the front and back on each side. These fit together with a small plastic poly cap in the middle of them, and they have a small groove that lines up to push fit together and hold them together nice and tight. So I've taken these all off the sprue, fitted those together, and also cleaned up the wheels with a small sanding stick just to make sure they're all nice and smooth and clean, ready for when they're fitted and when they're painted, and so there's no rough edges on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the wheels to one side and we'll look at the lower hull. Now, because the lower hull is mainly for the wheels, I'm just going to show you what the hull looks like. So it's a solid hull, and we have some slots that stick out the side. These are where the wheels go. They're held in place by some small pins that just slot in. We have a rear plate with the exhaust goes. And at the front we have a couple of small holes there, here on both, one on each side, and these are where some anchorage eyes will be fitted. So we're going to fit those, and that will be the only bit that we would do on the lower hull for this build today, as I say, because we're going to fit the wheels in a later video after we've done some painting and weathering. So these just snap straight in. They have a small grooves, indents inside, just to fit into the holes on the actual model. Once you've fitted those on there, they'll stay in place, and they can be moved around. They are very small and fragile, so be very careful not to push them too hard. As you see, I had a bit of trouble with the first one. Now that that's gone in place, you see, I'll move that around, and we'll go and get the second one put on now. And then once we've done that, we'll put the lower hull to one side, as we won't need to do anything further with that than the build today. So that second anchorage eye is on there, we've got both on there, and we'll put that to the side, and then we'll be working on the top hull. Now with the top hull, we're only going to fit a few pieces on there today, because there are some parts that need to go onto the side, and we're going to fit those later because they're going to be painted separately. So we're only going to fit a couple of small pieces, and I've again cut them off the sprue using a sanding stick. I have cleaned those up, ready to be fitted. So we're going to fit as you see here, there's some slots on the side. This is where some tow ropes and shovels and other equipment will be fitted later on. As I said, we're going to paint those separately, so we're going to leave those off the build today, and when we do the painting we'll get those fitted. First of all, we're going to just quickly put on a couple of small pieces at the front. We're going to first put a searchlight headlight that fits on the front in the middle of the upper hull, and that just slots into a small hole in there, push down, and that's fitted in place. We're next going to fit the bow gun, machine gun. This is a small fiddly piece. I actually had a little bit of trouble getting that to fit in the hole. I was trying to be very careful not to push down too hard when trying to get it into the hole for its placement, because I didn't want to break that, because if I had broken that I would then have had to glue that back together and then try fitting it again. I did find it a little bit fiddly, but eventually that did go into place after a little bit of tweaking of getting that into the right position. We got that into place and that slotted in nicely. As you can see, that's in there now, and so we've got our barrel machine gun there and our searchlight headlights at the front there. The next piece is a very small handle that goes on the rear of the upper hull, just in the middle section here towards the engine. This is a very small fiddly piece, so again trying to be very careful not to break it. I did again have some trouble trying to get that into place. I was very wary that it could ping off and could be lost by the carpet monster. So I decided to try and use a pair of tweezers just to get that lined up and slotted into place. As I did so, it decided it didn't want to go into place, so let's get it off of the model. It decided to get stuck in a little groove. I thought I'd try and do it manually instead, and again was not having it. So again, because I was not having much luck with that, I decided that I would try and use another pair of tweezers, a different pair with thin ends, try and hold that in place and get that in position. What you will see in a second is that it does go pinging off, and I did have to go looking around for the piece when I first tried to fit it. It was not going to plan, and this is one of the things you have to remember. These kits, because they are sort of caricatures of the original vehicles, they are very small. They do have some very small parts on them that can be very brittle, and they're very small holes that they're going into, so you do have to be very careful when fitting them, because they can very easily ping off and can get lost. So it's a case of just taking your time and making sure you get everything lined up, and get that in place. Once you've got it in place, use a pair of tweezers if need be, and once you've got it in there, it just pushes down and it holds it into place. Now I'm going to show you the inside of this upper hole, because with that small piece being in there, if you wanted to make sure that was secure, you can see inside in the small, you can see it pushing through, protruding, and you can put a little dab of glue there and hold it in place, and you can do the same with the barrel machine gun. So if you wanted to make those a bit more secure, you can give it a little dab and that will hold those in place. As I say, these are push fit kits, so you don't have to use glue, but there are times when you might need to do that. So we've got a couple more pieces to fit on the upper hole. We have a cover for the machine gun, and we also have, let's go just fit over the top of the machine gun. It's like an armoured guard for it, and we've also got a couple of more anchorage eyes to go on the rear there. So these again have been taken off the sprue, been given a clean up with a sanding stick to make sure they're all nice and smooth, and we're just going to quickly fit those into place. So first of all, we're going to get the cover for the barrel machine gun, just push that into position. I'll slot that in. Be careful not to sort of break the machine gun that's already in place. And once you've got that in position and it's all pushed in nice and snugly, that's done. And then the next bit we're going to do is just take the anchorage eyes and just fit those quickly onto the rear of the upper hole. These are like the exactly the same ones as we fitted on the lower hole at the front. So again, they have a couple of indentations. You pop those in and they'll hold in place and move around if you'd like them to. So here we have the cover, it just sits over the barrel machine gun, and the anchorage eyes, which can be moved around. This is the rear plate for the lower hole. So on here we have some exhaust pipes, a couple of exhaust covers, and a couple more anchorage eyes to fit on there, as well as a jack. So we're going to go ahead and get those fitted. Now, as I say, these are push fit kits. Now, I did have a bit of trouble getting these to actually, the exhaust pipes to actually fit onto there. So I did end up having to use a bit of glue, liquid cement, to actually hold those in place. Because they didn't have, although they went in, the fit wasn't snug enough, and there was a little bit of movement. So I decided the best thing to do, just secure them in place to make sure they weren't going to go anywhere. So I just used, as I say, a little bit of liquid cement just in the hole where it slots in for a bit of rigidity, and also just along the back behind the exhaust pipe, so that it holds that in place and it doesn't move or pop out. Because the last thing you want is for that to suddenly sort of pop out, and when you fit it on, and get lost. As you can see, so trying to get that in, it was not having it. It was getting in position, but it just wasn't gripping and holding as it should do. So I decided to glue that. And this is one of those very rare times with these kits. These Meng Toon kits are really well made. They're fantastic kits. This is now the 5th kit of the Meng Toons that I've made, and this is the first issue I've ever had with them. They are generally absolutely fantastic. But as I say, it's one of those things that, it does happen, but a little bit of glue just holds it in place and keeps that secure, and it's not going to make any difference to the model. On any other model, you'd be using your liquid cement all of the time to hold pieces in place. This, because it's push fit, you don't generally have to do that, but this is one of those very rare occasions where just needed to get a little bit of liquid cement out just to hold it in place. So we're going to get I'll make sure that we put both of those exhausts into place. And we also have there the jack, which fits onto the bottom. You see I had it upside down. I need to correct that. So we fit the jack on there just at the bottom. That's snapped in absolutely perfect. And now we'll go back and we're going to try and get one more time to try and get the exhaust in. I was determined not to use the glue if I didn't have to, but again, it didn't matter which way I tried it. The exhaust pipe was not fitting in properly, so had to result in using a bit of glue to hold that in place. The great thing with the liquid cement is that you can use Just a small little dab of it, and it holds the piece really well and bonds it really quickly. So just put a little bit into the hole, a little bit up where the exhaust sits up against the rear of that plate, and we just hold it there for a few seconds. After a few seconds of holding that, that's bonded, and you can just you can move on to the next one knowing that that is secured in place. So there we go, that's the first exhaust put in place now, and that's all secured. I'm just going to also just secure the covers over the exhaust, just because of the fact that the exhaust didn't fit as snugly as it should do. I decided I was going to glue the covers into place, just in case the exhaust decided to come away ever so slightly. There was still something in place there to hold it in and not get lost. So again, I'll take the second exhaust pipe, a little bit of glue, put that into place, hold that for a few seconds for that bond, and that's held in place. And again, a little bit of glue into the slots for the cover over the exhaust, and just pops in place. And once that's popped in with the glue, we know we've got a nice secure exhaust and covers over those. The last pieces we need to fit on here is a couple of anchorage eyes. So we're going to just go ahead and fit those two small little anchorage eyes onto there, and they fit onto the rear of the hole. We have a plate here, just slot onto the lower part of the hole. Now inside it has some grooves cut out, and on the plate itself there's a couple of slots that stick out, and they line up inside and you push together. I had a little bit of trouble getting that to line up in just the right position to start with, but after a little bit of pushing and playing with it, got it to line up in just the right position. It just had a little bit of a gap at the bottom, so I knew it wasn't just sitting just right. I was trying to be careful because of the issues with the exhaust. I didn't want to sort of push too hard and have those ping off. So be as tough as I could, but as gentle as I could, getting that into place. And just using that from top to bottom, just ease that into place, and eventually got it into the absolute right position. Everything lined up, and there was minimal gappage at the bottom on the hole. Very, very small hole, and because it's at the bottom in an area where you're not going to see it, there was no need to fill that with any sort of filler, putty or anything like that. So just went ahead, fitted on the anchorage eyes onto the rear. And when I could say anchorage eyes, these are sort of towing eyes. So there's 6 of these in total across the vehicle. Sorry, four of these. We've got 2 at the rear and 2 at the back on the lower hole. So we fitted those now. Those are all in place, and that's the lower hole. All built minus the wheels, which, as I say, we will pick up on a future video when we do the weathering. Now onto the turret, and this is the last bit that we're going to be building today. So we have the bottom part and we have the top part of the turret. We've also got the mantle which the gun fits into, and then that is held, and there we also have the gun. Because it's a King Tiger, it is a large gun. If you see, the muzzle brake is about the size of my nail on my little finger, and the gun has at one end where it fits into the mantle a little indentation, and inside the mantle is a little hole. You line up the indentation with the hole, push that through, and that locks it into place and holds it in position, in the correct position. So you just have to line it up. May need a little twist just to get it perfectly lined up. Once it's done, just push down, and then that is locked into place. Quick check to make sure. Oh, decides it's going to fire off on its own, but you can't quite see. But just inside the mantle is a little hole, and you can see that it's all lined up and in position there. And so we're going to now go and fit the mantle into the main turret to get this gun fitted. Once fitted, the gun does move around so that you can elevate and lower the gun. It doesn't hold in place very well in an elevated position, but it does actually elevate and move around. Inside the top part of the turret, there's a couple of arms that stick up with grooves taken out, and on the mantle inside there's a couple of grooves. When you look at the mantle from the side, you can see it has a long and a short part to the mantle where it sits in. The long part goes towards the bottom as we're looking at it, and fits just inside there, and then the bottom part of the turret fits over the top. Inside the turret there are slots which line up with the slots in the bottom, so just hold in place. So you just need to line those up, and once they're all lined up and the mantle's in the correct position, everything will snap together and be held. And as I noticed, I didn't have the mantle in quite the right place to fit it originally, so there's a small little move around, getting the lower part underneath the mantle and in the right position, snap together, and that's all done. So just pushing it around in all the different positions, make sure that every one of the 6 slots is in there, and that's the main part of the turret and gun built. So now we're just going to do the final little pieces on the turret. So we have the commander's hatch, we also have gunner's hatch there, and we've also got some carry rails, as well as some spare tracks and a rear escape hatch on the turret to fit. Now on the rear escape hatch there is a small handle that goes on there, so we're going to fit that onto the hatch and just get that pushed into place. Now I did find with this that the holes on the escape hatch were a little bit small, and so I needed to open those up. And we've also got this here, you can see I'm just in the gunner's hatch, the slots in place, and with the gunner's hatch here it opens and closes so you can have it in either position. It's a shame that one thing Meng don't do is they don't do small caricature figures that go with the tanks. I think that would be a really great idea for them to potentially look at. I think that would add to the models, especially if you were having some sort of diorama that you wanted to put these into. So just going to fit some of the carry handles onto the front here. These are sort of grab rails, so if a soldier was getting up onto the tank, they can hold onto these and pull themselves up the turret. to get to either the commander or the gunner's turrets, or just to get themselves up onto the main body of the turret if they're going to maybe sit on it. So these are very simple. A couple of holes, push them down, and they fitted perfectly. Next is a small visor that just sits in between those two grab rails. So I'm just going to push that into place, and when that's done, that would be a little visor, like a periscope for the commander to be able to see out of when he's inside. We're going to take the grab rails that go on the rear. Again, these are very small, they're very fiddly, and so need to be very careful when fitting them. You don't push down too hard and break them. Once you've got them lined up, as long as everything's lined up perfectly, and the holes are the right size and no fit issues there, they'll push straight down and go into place. Now, I mentioned earlier in the clip the escape hatch at the rear. This is, as you will see, this is the handle that goes onto that hatch. You'll see that I did have a little bit of trouble trying to get it into place, and it wasn't going in. The holes were just ever so slightly too small for the handle to slot into, but I was able to sort that out. A small pin vise would work, or as you will see with what I did, I just took a small craft knife and just used the end of the craft knife just to open the holes up on both sides ever so slightly. It's literally just the very tip of that in there. Quick turn of the knife just opens up that hole ever so slightly. Once I've done that, the handle then fitted in perfectly. As you see here, goes in, and it goes in first time. Little push, being careful again because it is a very small, fragile part. You don't want to push too hard and snap that. So like that, and then just on the inside and outside, just a little bit of cement, because I had to sort of open the holes up and it fitted in. I didn't want it popping out, so just a little bit of cement on there just to hold that into place, and then that just slots into the grooves on the rear, or at least it would for but not first time. So just making sure, just being very careful where you position your hands to push that into place, and that slots in there. And then the last pieces that need to go on there are the spare pieces of track that fit onto the rear sides. So we're going to fit those there. Like I say, final pieces actually, we've got the commander's hatch still to finish. So we're going to quickly pop the tracks on. Once the tracks are on, we'll then fit the two pieces to make up the hatch for the commander's cupola. So we just fit the first piece, we'll line it up in the right position, and that just slots straight down into position. And then we take the door, which has a small stand on it, it just slots into a little hole. You turn it around, push it into place, and that's then held. And that's the main base. I did realise after I'd put the tracks on that the tracks weren't sitting quite right, and realised I'd actually put them on upside down. So you see, here's our commander's turret. We have that door can still open and close if you wanted to, and we have our tracks on there. As I say, I did notice here that the tracks weren't sitting flush up to the body, and that's when I realised that I actually put them on upside down. The great thing is, because they hadn't gone all the way through, I was able to just sort of get them off very easily, turn them around, push them in, and they would then flush up to the body, and as they should be. A nice tight fit on there. There's our escape hatch at the back. And that is the completed turret. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit the turret onto the upper hull, give you an idea of what that looks like. And there is the turret on the upper hull, and then the lower hull and upper hull fits together. Again, snap fit, but we're not going to fit that today because the skirts on the upper hull go over where the tracks and the wheels are, and because we want to do the weathering on the lower hull with some mud and that, we're not going to fit that, push those together today. But once we've done the weathering and the painting of that, and it's all been done, we'll then fit them together as completed. As I say, in here I want to put some mud deposits, so that it's all nicely weathered in there, and I want to do that before I put the wheels on, so that we don't have any issues. These are the tracks for the tank. They're rubber. There's not a lot of play in them, so you can't pull them too much, but they're nice thick rubber, so we'll put those to one side because we don't need them yet. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it.